That wasn't a millennial pause. That was me comprising my thoughts for what I'm going to say about Alien Romulus, the most recent feature from Fede Alvarez, brought to you by the good folks at 20th Century Fox, who at this point are just basically Disney folks. My name is Jason. I'm the last manager of the last video store in the universe. When I'm not busy managing a video store or collecting VHS, as you can see behind me, for my own personal collection as a sicko, I go to the movie theater and I watch movies and I come back from the movie theater and I talk about them on the internet for a decreasing amount of people by the day watching and listening. So that's pretty great. We are in the throes of VHS summer. It's going to begin in earnest on this coming Tuesday with our episode with Don Simpson, on Don Simpson, number of his films with brother, uncle Dave from Spoiler Piece Theater making his very first appearance on the podcast. So go ahead and check that out. That'll kick off the show in earnest. We've got new merch, bingemovies.threadless.com. Go ahead and check out the merch. That's pretty exciting. And now it's time to talk about Alien Romulus. No spoilers whatsoever, but I'm doing another video for patrons over at patreon.com/binge movies, which will include spoilers. So if you were a patron over at patreon.com/binge movies, you would get this instant reaction even more instantaneously than you already are. So go ahead and check us out over there. Okay, without getting any spoilers really whatsoever, here's what I would say about Alien Romulus. It's getting a lot of praise from what I've seen on the internet, although maybe that number is decreasing. I don't know. I'm not tracking that, but it opened to a lot of kind of critical acclaim, and fair enough. I would say this is not a movie. I would say that this is a video game, and I don't necessarily mean that in a purely pejorative sense. I mean that in the way that probably from like the PS2 era moving forward, video games, especially around IP, became about remixing the ideas from the movies or the IP and turning them into a playable experience for the players. And so we can't adapt James Cameron's Aliens, probably due to rights reasons, but the studio has rights to the general concept of colonial marines and ships and whatever. And so we're going to make you a colonial marine recruit, and we're going to put you on a ship, and you're going to be with other colonial marines, and you're just going to happen to find yourself in circumstances that are damn near identical to the stuff you've seen in the movie. But it's not going to be the movie. It's going to be something else. And it's not a reboot. It's not a remake. It's not an adaptation. It is a new experience set in the universe of. And a lot of those video games, when you get to the PS4 era, probably even PS3, I don't know, skip that era. I did. When you get to the PS4 era, a lot of those experiences, those video games then would delve into, when you get further into the deeper waters of the video game, they'd pull stuff out of concept art for movies, like, oh, in the original script for Alien, this does not happen in this movie, by the way, but in the original script for Alien, the people were eggs. The life cycle of the alien was slightly different, and the people were transformed into the eggs that made the face huggers. So in a odd way, the face huggers were sort of versions of the people. It was like this whole weird parasitic thing. And they cut that scene with Dallas where you could see him starting to transform into an egg, and therefore there was this gap in the breeding cycle, and the queen was made, and so forth and so on, when James Cameron came along. And so video games would pull that, right? Because that's like a fact. It's like a deep, it used to be a piece of like movie production lore, a deep piece of lore, but it isn't anymore because of the internet, and so everybody knows it. And at least anybody who tracks these sort of movies. And they would then include that into the video game. And they would maybe write around it and be like, well, you're on a genetic testing lab, and they were modifying human genes to turn them into eggs, or come up with some kind of whatever spackling you needed in your script to get that piece to work. For those who don't know, I have earlier in the year, starting around May, I took a challenge on, and the challenge, this was for patrons over at patreon.com/binge movies, cheap plug. And the challenge was to try to rewrite a franchise movie that didn't work, not make it my version of the movie, but try to take what was already produced, take the essence and the bones of that movie, and see if I could restructure it and make it a more coherent film. I ended up doing that. So I have a 119-page finished screenplay that's relatively professional in presentation, at least as far as margins and formatting and industry standard stuff like that goes, music cues, everything. But it's a story draft. And a story draft is you're really just trying to figure out, okay, who are my characters? What's the focus? What's the story going to be? What's the antagonist? What's some dialogue? There's no polish to it. It's a kind of a rough draft, but maybe somewhere between a rough draft and like a first draft, because you have more. This doesn't exactly make sense. There's debates about what makes a first draft versus whatever. Here's the reason why I bring that up. I have sympathy for somebody who's being handed the keys to a franchise and being told, we want you to make your own movie, but we also want you to honor what's come before. And also being a fan of that franchise, and wanting to honor what has come before, because you're wanting, as a fan, you want to deliver for other fans, but you're going to try to deliver to the fan base what that franchise means to you and how you interpreted it. So Fetty and his writing partner on this, I think, do a really good job of understanding a version of the world of Weyland Yutani. This movie takes place between Alien and Aliens, closer to Aliens, because there's obviously a time gap there of 52 or 54 years, 57, something like that. And I start with some positives. The positives are, this is a movie cost less than $100 million, which so did the franchise film that I am working on currently, which is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This looks 100 times better than Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, partly because it's 20th Century Fox, or Fox Studios, 20th Century Studios behind it, I should say. It's 20th Century Studios behind it and not Sony, because all of Sony's movies look like they were made in somewhere that is not Earth. They all look the same. Even when they go to real locations, it doesn't look right. I think it's the cameras. And I know people swear by Sony cameras, but I don't know what it is. But I have not liked the way a Sony movie has looked since probably Zero Dark 30. Yeah, I can't think of one that I like looking at. So it blows out the Frozen Empire out of the water in that category. But it is essentially not a remake, not a reboot, not a reimagining, not a legacy sequel. It's not an adaptation. It is a remix. And I think that is, in a broader sense, where we are. Just like the IP video games, I think with IP filmmaking, that's where we are now. We are fully in the camp of remix movies. These are no longer reboots, because people don't want those. They don't want a hard reboot. They don't want a hard reset. They're not really remakes. And this isn't even like a remake to the point, like, it's not like, people would say, well, The Force Awakens is sort of a soft reboot or a soft remake of, the legacy sequel to the original trilogy. And this isn't even really that. It's much more akin to like music, where, okay, it's a remix. It's, how do we take these certain elements and remix them and position them differently and do some new things in some new directions. And I think, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, it's tough. If you're a filmmaker and you're caught between two giant legacies, the legacy of Ridley Scott, who still has some kind of a relationship with Disney Fox, I can't go beyond that, and James Cameron, who still has a relationship with Disney Fox because of the Avatar movies, and both those guys want their shit to get their shit in, and you want to get your shit in, you essentially have three competing ideas of what an alien movie is that have to coexist with each other. So as a piece of IP filmmaking in the modern era, I think Fetty does an incredible job. Alvarez, I think, does an incredible job I think he's a good director. I think the movie is well directed. I really like the way this looks. I like a lot of the space stuff looks really good. The spaceship stuff. There's touches of some of the more European sensibilities from Alien Resurrection, of all things. Some directorial flares. There's some set pieces. This is not a spoiler, but there is a lot of, how do I put this? It looks like it could be a sequel to just about any of the prime core Alien films. You know, it does not look out of place compared to Resurrection or 3 or Aliens or Alien. It kind of blends all of those films together, and in a way that kind of patches over the franchise, because you had all these different directors who had very distinct styles, and they had all different cinematographers, and they were made in different decades, and some of them were plagued with production problems. And so to have one movie that kind of goes, you could sort of look at this movie and go, oh, I see how you could get to a Fury 225 or 227 or whatever it is, the prison planet. I could see that there would be a world where the Wayland Corporation would be involved in like prison planets. I could see that in that same world, or in the future of that same world, the resurrection ship and what they're doing there, even though that's like, I think it's beyond Wayland, it's into the United Space Federation or whatever it is. I could see that. Like I could see that what already has come before exists or is the basis of, or the seeds are planted of in this movie. Just from a visual standpoint, nothing story or character wise, just the visual standpoint. And that's really good. But I mean, there's some really cool stuff in here, and there's some really, really tense, fun, scary set pieces. I think Fede is seemingly way more interested in the facehugger than he is the full-grown xenomorph, which is fine by me, because, or maybe that's just a decision because the facehugger doesn't get a lot of time in the other movies. You know, he kind of initially does, but the franchise is really focused on the Xeno. So sort of reining that back in and giving a lot of screen time to a iteration of this character we haven't seen before is probably a fresh choice. It's a semi-fresh direction to take stuff in. Now, what else can I say that doesn't get into any kind of spoilers? Ultimately, you know, you're probably asking, well, do you like it? Do you not like it? It's a mixed bag. I think it's a real mixed bag. I could see some of the decisions that are made in this movie really alienating, no pun intended, fans of this franchise. There's a big swing that is taken, and that either is going to work for you or it's going to take you out of the movie and piss you off the entire fucking time that you're conscious of it. My jaw dropped to some extent, not just because of what it was, but because of how it was executed. And especially at first, it's not executed very well. My opinion, it just doesn't look very. That's where you go, oh, this is an $80 million movie and not a $200 million movie. And then, actually, there's probably two big fucking decisions that could potentially piss people off. And so I would say, like, okay, if you want a remix of Alien 1 through 4 and maybe more, this is it. This is, if you want a very creative director and seemingly like a pretty creative writer to come up with fresh spins on and reconstituting, it's almost like a mutant version of those 4 films. If that's what you want, if you just wanted the next mutation of the thing that you've already seen across the entire franchise, so be it. I think that's one of the things that's changed about franchise filmmaking is, for a long time, we would, I think this is a product of being a millennial, and I'll close with this. We were raised on VHS tapes and cable and satellite TV, pretty much around the world in most of the Western civilization. So for those of us who lived in countries where this kind of media permeated and was saturated. We watched this shit over and over and over and over again. I don't know how old Fede is, but I want to. If I had to guess, I would guess that he's a millennial or very, very, very close. So let me Google him real quick before I go on this Galaxy Brain. It was from Uruguay. 46. So he's maybe very, 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 very end of Gen X or tippy top of elder millennial. And you can tell. You can tell this is a guy who's digested these movies over and over and over and over and over again. So when we're given a crack at it, we want to create moments in the movies we make. I say we, I'm not making any movies, but you want to create moments in the stories that you tell that make a new generation or current day audiences feel the way you felt the first time you watched fill in the blank. And you want a chance to play in that sandbox, just like a video game developer. And so you come up with cool stuff like, wouldn't it be cool if you were a colonial marine and you had to weld doors shut and do, and I'm talking from like the video game perspective. And wouldn't it be cool if you were, that scene in the fourth act essentially of Alien, where Ripley is stripped down to her underwear and she doesn't see the alien and she has to blow it out of the airlock and she has to be real quiet and stealthy. What if we made a stealth game and that was the entirety of the stealth game? What if we made a run and gun action shooter or a tactical shooter or a first person shooter multiplayer where you get to play as a group of colonial marines? Or what if we made a turn based, blah 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 off of the colonial marines? Like, they've made so many different versions of Alien in video game format, and it's all about taking a simple concept from the movie and how can we apply that to the video game genre. So Fede, to me, is kind of a body horror guy, so he's a right fit for the franchise. How do we take this and get it back to its body horror roots when he is allowed to do his own stuff and not do a remix of the stuff that has come before? I think those parts would equal up to the best Aliens movie since Aliens. It's not in the same ballpark as Alien or Aliens, but those moments to me are like the third best Alien movie. And definitely the best one without Sigourney Weaver. And nowhere near the worst one. When you start adding in those remix elements, it gets a little dicier. It's not that all of them are failures or they don't work, but some of them are really eye-rolling. There was a subtle thing in the first Alien, and it's kind of picked up on in Aliens, but just very briefly. There's this subtle thing in Alien in which the creature just so happens, for plot reasons, to resemble the industrial, grimy parts of this mining ship. And so it just so happens to be able to perfectly blend into the walls and amongst the tubes and steam and weird pipes and shit. Because this is biomechanical creature, and so it can kind of blend into these mechanical settings. That idea is taken to the nth degree in this movie, so that almost every scene, once they're aboard the space station, Remus and Romulus, which I think is a very cool concept, by the way. Almost every scene, once they get aboard the space station, is a visual reference. There's a visual reference of the xenomorph or the facehugger or the egg positor of the queen or the queen herself or itself or other things. At one point the space station casts a shadow because it's getting ready to crash, and this is not a spoiler. That's early into the film. I didn't even cover what the plot of this is. I will at the very end here. And it casts a shadow, and that shadow looks like a very particular thing from this franchise. And that sort of stuff always like took me out of it, because where it was subtle, there's this subtle transition from the station. It's also the Axe Chemicals in Batman '89. There's a subtle transition from the industrial factory refinery piece of the colony into the weird goopy resin bone skeletal sex organ shit that makes up the nest. And like, oh fuck. So, and then, well, they're all over the place. And it's like, well, maybe they don't show up in the scanners. Yeah, maybe. And he's right there. We can see it. He can't. None of that inventiveness and that smartness is in this movie. It just doesn't function at that level. And so that takes some of the joy out of some of those visual references. They're overdone, and there's not as much ingeniousness. You got to give Cameron his credit. The dude was ingenious. So I say that. I also say this is a sort of movie where whole lines of dialogue are going to be reused and repurposed. And there's one particular scene that's very egregious. Other than there's something in this, I'll cover it in spoilers at patreon.com/binge movies. There's this one scene we have two characters, and the two characters, it's a two shot, right? So it's character A is talking to character B, and we're watching them from across the table, like we're listening into the conversation. It's a side shot. And there's at least three things in the shot that have no reason. One of them in particular has no reason to be there other than the fact that it's on the console that Dallas sits at in the opening of Alien. And if it had just been there somewhere in the background, just so happened to be in the background somewhere, that would have been enough. But it's not. It's all very much front loaded. And so there are some references that I think make sense. They work themselves into the script. It's very logical. And again, this is in continuity of this world. And so it makes sense that, okay, in this timeline, in this world, in this universe, people do certain things and certain things, blah, 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 blah. But there's other stuff that's not as well thought through, that has no reason to be there other than the fact that so that you can do the Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, I know that, right? That's so. So if it sounds like I'm kind of up and down about the movie, it's because I think it's an up and down movie. I think some of these set pieces in here really, really work. I would have loved to have seen what he could have done with this given more freedom. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is he had total freedom to do whatever he wanted. But to me, it feels like there's maybe some studio obligation here to not alienate the old guys who one of them is making Gladiator, and I don't know if Gladiator would be for Fox or 20th Century rather, or not. I don't know who that's under. Is it Warner Brothers or is it 20th Century? Let's find out. Now I'll answer that question. And Cameron definitely is, because he's got 10 Avatar movies. While I'm looking that up, I'll tell you what the story is real quick in case you don't know. The story is there are a group of young people, because we can't have old people in movies anymore. There's a group of young people who are oh, it's Paramount. Interesting. Is the first one Paramount? Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong about. Maybe my conspiracy theory is wrong there. It's a group of young people who are trying to get off this colony. They're basically indentured servants to a mine on this a shake and bake colony on this semi-terraformed planet. And there's some scrappers who are on the planet. They have the small ship that is suitable for small, short distance space travel. To basically go in the asteroid belt and grab minerals and shit you'd need, or transport cargo from A to B, or just different stuff like that. And it comes into contact with a ship. It picks up that there's a ship that's in the orbit of the planet, and so they're going to be in the orbit for a brief period of time, and they're the only ones who know about it. And if they could get up there, if they could get resources that they need, I'll leave it at that, to get off the planet and to go to a planet that isn't a hellhole. And our main character is another female lead who is one of the best parts of the movie. And I would say the acting is suitable to good. The best, Kaylee Spaney is playing Rain Carradine. She is the best part of this movie. And David Johnson is playing a character called Andy, and he's really good. He's actually probably my favorite part of the movie. But the two of them together are very, very good, and they're kind of a brother sister pair. And but he's off a little bit, and so he's dependent on her, and so she's, imagine trying to take care of a dependent person in a hellhole. So, and she's worked and slaved away to earn enough space bucks to be able to buy passage like through the company to get to this other planet. And then they're like, when she's got the money, they just raise how much money she needs because Wayland is evil. The Weyland-Yutani Corporation are just like, oh, actually it's double, so you got about 7 more years. And there's no chance she's even going to live that long. Like, people just don't live that long on this, whatever. So, and they're like, these young people are like, we're all going to die here. Like, disease is starting to spread, like infections, the mines are getting more and more dangerous. They're like, they're never going to let us off this planet, and we're going to die. And we don't have the resources we need with our little ships because we can only go short distances to get where we need, get anywhere, because it's light years. So we got to steal these resources to get where we need to go. I think that's a pretty solid setup for one of these movies. And what they find when they get into space is not another spaceship, but is a space station, which is the Romulus and Remus space station. It's a twin double space station. And it is a Weyland-Yutani research space station. And you can imagine what they find when they arrive at that station. And they're just there for a quick trip to get the shit they need to get on the road and try to get to the next planet, and things go awry. If I had to give this a good old letterbox scale, since it was a roller coaster for me of up and down, out of 5 stars, I give it a solid, it's a 2.5 or a 3. The hard part for me is the parts that really work, really work. And there's some real fucked up, disturbing shit in this movie. Really fucked up shit. It works so well. I'll say this: it works so well so much of the time that I found myself wishing that he would get a sequel to this, another movie, another in the Alien series, but with a different writer, somebody with some fresh ideas. Because I think combined, I think he could make a really excellent, very easy 3rd place film. Like, you'd go, okay, there's out of 10 of these movies, 3 of them are pretty good, which is all you can hope for nowadays. So, and I could see where audiences are really going to like this. It's thrilling, it's exciting, there's a lot of great action. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief that you're going to need to have, though, because at certain times things just don't make any sense. It's just a very uneven screenplay, would be my guess, and therefore it's a very uneven film. So I'll give it a 3 for good measure, because the parts I liked, I really liked. Have you seen it? Are you going to go see it? Have you read the spoilers of the internet? Because people are going to spoil this very quickly, and there's going to be a lot of dissenting opinions about it, and I could see a lot of people being really pissed off about some of the decisions they make in this movie. I will talk about that more over at patreon.com/binge movies. Thank you for listening or watching, wherever you find your podcast. Till next time, binge on.